All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for this Community Environmental Council webinar. It's just past 12 p.m. We're going to get started. We're going to wrap up right around 1:15 p.m. If you haven't done so yet, please share your name and where you're joining us from in the chat. My name is Sean MacArthur, and I'm a Climate Programs Associate with the Community Environmental Council, and I will be today's host. Thank you again for joining us today for our Breaking Up with Fossil Fuels webinar series. Today, we'll do a deep dive into electric vehicles. Before we get started, we'll do a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being presented in English with Spanish interpretation. I'm happy to introduce Javi Infante and Naira Guzman from Rooted Language Justice, who will review how to access Spanish interpretation for this webinar. Thank you both for being here with us today.
Thank you, Sean. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Javi. I am here from Rooted Language Justice, and I will be orienting everyone to the interpretation function for this webinar. I will do this message in both English and Spanish. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Javi. Soy de Rooted Language Justice y seré una de las intérpretes el día de hoy con mi colega Naira. Voy a orientarles para usar la función de interpretación. Language justice is an important practice for CEC, and we remind you that this webinar will be interpreted into English and Spanish. La justicia del lenguaje es una práctica importante para el CEC y les recordamos que este seminario web será interpretado en inglés y en español. The interpretation feature is now activated. If you're on a computer, you will see a globe at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you're connected from a mobile device, you will see a three-dot menu in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Click on these and select the language that you prefer. If you are not bilingual in both English and Spanish, you must select a language channel. La función de interpretación ya está activada. Si estás conectado desde una computadora, verás aparecer un globo terráqueo en la parte inferior de la ventana de Zoom. En un dispositivo móvil vas a ver 3 puntitos en la esquina inferior de la pantalla. Haz clic ahí y elige el idioma que prefieres. Si no eres bilingüe en inglés y en español, debes de elegir un canal de idioma. We ask speakers to kindly please speak at a moderate pace and spell or explain any acronyms when they are first mentioned. Les pedimos a los oradores que hablen un paso moderado y que expliquen o deletreen las siglas la primera vez que se mencionan. Finally, as we expect folks joining this webinar to be active in the chat and with the Q&A feature, we ask for your support in making sure your comments and questions can be understood in both languages by translating for yourself using the DeepL tool we are now dropping in the chat. Every time you are about to write something in the chat or Q&A, please translate it using DeepL and paste your message in both languages. Machine translation is not 100% accurate, but it will help us communicate across languages in this space. Finalmente, esperamos que las personas que nos acompañan en este seminario web van a estar usando el chat activamente, además de la función de preguntas y respuestas. Les pedimos que nos ayuden a traducir lo que compartan utilizando DeepL, una herramienta que estamos compartiendo en el chat en este momento, para asegurarnos de que sus comentarios y preguntas puedan ser entendidos en ambos idiomas. Cada vez que vayan a escribir algo en el chat o en la función de preguntas y respuestas, por favor, tradúzcanlo usando DeepL y peguen su mensaje en ambos idiomas. La traducción automática no es 100% exacta, pero nos ayudará a comunicarnos entre idiomas en este espacio. Thank you, and we will now pass it over to the host. We may now begin to use the interpretation feature. Gracias, le pasamos la palabra al anfitrión. Ahora podemos comenzar a usar la función de interpretación.
Thank you so much, Javi. We're happy to have everyone here with us today. In case you want to rewatch or you weren't able to make it live, this webinar is being recorded. Everyone who registered will receive a link to the recording and other resources in an email in a few days. This is an active session and your engagement is welcome. We invite you to add questions to the Q&A during the presentations. If someone else has a similar question to the one that you have, you can upvote that question by clicking the little thumbs up next to it. Please use the chat for any other comments, concerns, appreciations, or even resources that you might want to share. We have a CEC support team here to help us, including Nicole and Jillian, who are running the technical side of things, Katie and Jeannie Marie, who you'll see as panelists, and Kristen, who is monitoring the chat and the Q&A as an attendee. Additionally, we have Christian from the city of Santa Barbara and Michael from CEC helping answer questions in the Q&A. and Dominique assisting with translation in the Q&A as well. Slide, please. This virtual meeting is taking place in what's known as California, home to nearly 200 tribal nations. We acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of our many regions. CEC is coming to you from Chumash lands. I welcome you to add your acknowledgement to the chat if you'd like. For those of you who are new to CEC or who haven't heard what we've been up to in transportation recently, I'm going to share a video in a moment that actor Jeff Bridges recently did with us. As we get that queued up, we'd love to hear a bit more about you and how you're already taking part in climate action. Please answer the quick poll that will pop up on your screen. The poll is anonymous, and we use it only to better understand our audience's needs and interests so we can better serve you. The poll questions are as followed. First will be, do you participate in climate change advocacy? Do you own or lease an electric vehicle? Do you take climate into account when buying groceries and or dining out? And which feature webinar would you most be interested in attending? So it should be popping up on your screen now. So go ahead and fill those out. The future webinars that we are considering are climate policy advocacy, how you can change your community for the better, building environmental justice, how we can create change now, how to become a CEC climate steward. And of course, if you're interested in all of them, you can select all of these.
Burning fossil fuels like gasoline and diesel releases carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas, into the atmosphere, making vehicles the largest local contributor to climate chaos. The Community Environmental Council has a plan. We're on the road to eliminating gas-polluting cars and trucks in California. With partners, we've ensured the Central Coast is leading this transition with 3 times the national average of electric vehicles and thousands of charging stations already installed. CEC is also speeding up the transition by ensuring that everyone has access to an affordable electric vehicle, regardless of the size of their paycheck. At the same time, we are moving the Central Coast to 100% renewable electricity, meaning that those electric cars and trucks will literally be driving on sunshine. To change everything, we need everyone. Are you in? Join us at CECSB.org to end climate chaos now.
Awesome. Special thank you to Jeff Bridges for partnering with us on that video. Always find it very exciting. Let's go ahead and take a look at our poll results. All right, for our first question, do you own or lease an electric vehicle? We have a good chunk of folks that are currently driving electric vehicles or are interested in purchasing an electric vehicle in the future. It's very exciting. Hoping to help a lot of you folks out that are planning to. And for those who say no, hopefully I can sway you in that direction if you'd like. How familiar are you with the incentive programs available to purchase or lease electric vehicles? A lot of you are not very familiar or somewhat familiar, and I'm going to cover a lot of that later. Hopefully, I'll be able to give you the information that you need to move forward. You participate in climate change advocacy. Looks like a good chunk of you often do or sometimes do. Thank you for doing that. It's very important. Do you take climate action into account in buying groceries or dining out? Most people do, it seems. Only a few never do. That's great to see. And for future webinars, looks like the majority of you, almost half of you, want to see all of these, which is super encouraging for us and gives us really great feedback for what webinars we'll do next. So thank you for answering those poll questions. So here's an overview for today's webinar. We'll start with an EV 101 presentation that provides foundational knowledge for finding affordable EVs that fit your needs. I'll talk about why you should drive an EV in the current EV market and challenges. I'll then go over how EV chargers work and how it's cheaper than driving on gasoline, and break down how CEC is working to make EV adoption more accessible. Next, you'll hear an EV purchase success story from a former EVs for Everyone purchase guidance participant, Tal Avitzer. Then we will learn about resources and support offered by the Community Environmental Council and Access Clean California to support you in getting incentives and help you navigate making an EV purchase or lease. We'll then wrap up with more Q&A pulled from the questions that you shared in the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So why drive an EV? Well, EVs on average produce 75 to 100% less greenhouse gases than the average gas-powered car. With California's electrical grid supplying increasing amounts of clean, renewable electricity for fuel, we've steadily been decreasing our electricity's climate impact. Our local community choice energy programs, including Santa Barbara Clean Energy and Central Coast Community Energy, are helping to accelerate our transition to 100% renewable electricity that is offered at lower rates than Southern California Edison and PG&E. Decreasing our greenhouse gas emissions is essential for decreasing our climate impact. EVs promote a healthier quality of life for our community. With zero tailpipe emissions, driving electric results in less air pollution and cleaner air to breathe in our community. And with a rapidly growing public charging infrastructure, EV accessibility is quickly increasing. Driving an EV also has a variety of financial benefits. While the upfront cost of purchasing an EV compared to a gas-powered car is higher, the cost over the lifetime of the vehicle is much lower. With 100 times fewer moving parts than an internal combustion engine car, EVs have significantly fewer maintenance costs. Fuel is also significantly cheaper and will be covered later in this presentation. EVs are also very fun to drive with immediate power. They're fast, responsive, and reliable. As you can see from the graphic on the screen, EV sales have been steadily increasing since their inception, with record sales in 2023. Since 2011, California has seen over 1.6 million EV sales. This year, in the second quarter alone in California, there were over 125,000 EV sales. With all new vehicles in the US being required to be electric by the year 2035, these numbers will only increase. We've seen strong growth in the EV market, even during the pandemic. And worldwide EV sales now account for a staggering 19% of all vehicles sold. We've advocated hard for the EV investments and incentives that are now flowing. But in this moment, there are still challenges to EV adoption. CEC is working through this webinar, and programs we'll share shortly to help people overcome these barriers and address common concerns so we can all experience the benefits of driving an EV. We're committed to delivering increased support to underserved communities and low to moderate income households with the longest commutes, advancing providing more bilingual and eventually multilingual support, and bring a climate justice lens to our EV programs and projects. We're working to influence who can access information, incentives, charging, and other resources that are needed to benefit from an EV. A business as usual approach to the EV transition will only reinforce existing inequities. Social, economic, and environmental justice issues compound each of these barriers. Charging access is a common barrier and concern for many prospective EV owners. Unfortunately, there are public charging deserts in some communities. Some communities may not have an abundance of public EV charging, and if they live in an apartment, they most likely don't have access to charging at home. We're helping to channel investments for more fast charging stations, working with local partners and communities to ensure that new investments in charging infrastructure flow to the places that need them most. With many people along the Central Coast living in apartments, we're also working hard to increase EV charging at multifamily housing, allowing for more people to confidently purchase an EV with access to convenient charging. The greatest financial barrier is the higher upfront cost to purchase or lease an electric vehicle. To address this barrier, we partnered with Ecology Action to bring purchase guidance to participants, in conjunction with Access Clean California to support increased access to multilingual information about EV incentives and help people streamline the process to applying for the incentives that they can. And the last barrier is that some dealerships will also increase their EV prices above vehicles MSRP, adding dealer markups due to high demand. With supply chain issues on the decline, markups should continue to decrease as well. We're now providing guidance and support so people are well informed and know the EV options that will work for them, so they can move fast when the vehicles they want become available. And the last major barrier and concern that many people have is public safety power shutoffs in many areas. Heat waves can trigger grid reliability issues. And to address this, we're working to bring more EV charging with backup power to our region so people have public charging options that still work when the grid is down. With battery efficiency and EV range increasing, and outages typically working on a rolling basis, with sections of power in the city being turned off periodically, this issue really is blown out of proportion. Additionally, most power outages occur during peak hours when the greatest strain is put on the grid. This is typically between the hours of 4 and 9 p.m. Most EVs and EV chargers will allow you to schedule your charging. Charging during the middle of the night during off-peak hours is standard practice for those who have home charging, making power outages not much of an issue for most everyday driving. CEC has also been working to increase renewable energy sources, such as solar power with battery storage, which will allow people to charge their vehicles, even when things like extreme heat blackouts occur. If you have other concerns or specific questions about challenges, go ahead and put them in the chat or the Q&A so we can address them later and send out the most relevant resources at the end of this webinar. So what is an EV? Well, an EV is a vehicle that runs on a battery that is fueled by electricity and can plug in to charge or use a gas engine and battery together. Here are the two types of EVs. There's battery electric, or BEV for short, and plug-in hybrid, or PHEV for short. You may notice that hybrids aren't listed on here, and that's because, well, hybrid vehicles are simply more efficient gas cars. They're unable to run without gasoline. Used BEVs, or battery electric vehicles, can be found on average starting around $10,000 to $12,000. Prices have been consistently decreasing as time goes on, and more EVs are introduced to the market. With the largest used EV market in the country, there are plenty of options to choose from in California. Used PHEVs, or plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, start right around the same price point of $10,000 to $12,000. With older PHEVs and BEVs, they can be found for even less with higher mileage. The cheapest new EV can be purchased for just over $26,000. However, you can find EVs for close to and well over $50,000. These numbers are prior to any financial incentives that you may qualify for. So these prices are new for new and used vehicles, should be actually lower than what they're listed at here. There are a variety of new EVs available, with manufacturers coming out with new models every single year, and resources will be provided later for exploring EV options. So the biggest affordability factor, other than the upfront cost, is the cost of charging. Whether charging at home or at publicly available chargers, fueling an EV can cost 1/3 as much when compared to a gas-powered car. There are 3 types of EV charging, starting with level 1 charging. This type of charging only requires a standard 120-volt outlet, which you can typically find in your garage. It's the outlet that you find all around your house. Most vehicle manufacturers will provide you with a level 1 charger when you purchase your vehicle, which you can use on the go or at home. The charger provides about 3 to 5 miles per hour of range, which doesn't sound like much, but if you have the capability to charge overnight, it covers the average person's daily commute. Level 2 charging is the step up and requires a 240-volt outlet. This type of outlet is what you typically will plug your washer or dryer into. They can be found or installed both in homes and in public and charge anywhere from 23 to 91 miles per hour, depending on the power output of the charger. This type of charger is how most people charge their EVs. And the last type of charger is DC fast charging. It's the highest level of charging. Due to high amounts of electricity, DC fast charging can only be installed in public places. This type of charger provides 145 to 347 miles in an hour, allowing individuals to get on the road more quickly. This is a great option for charging while on long road trips, reducing the amount of time that you need to stop at charging stations for fuel. To allow for the most affordable EV charging experience, charging during off-peak hours yields the lowest cost charging. Off-peak charging costs about 22 cents per kilowatt hour. The average EV has an efficiency of about 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour. This means that it costs about 6 cents per mile driven, about 1/4 to 1/3 of the cost of gasoline, or the equivalent of about $1.48 per gallon of gasoline. With the average cost of gasoline in California being $5.29 per gallon, driving an EV is the obvious choice for low-cost fuel. While charging at home is the lowest cost option, charging at public charging stations also offers low-cost fuel. With over 2,000 level 2 and over 287 DC fast charging stations in the Tri-County area, there's an abundance of readily available public charging stations, with more being installed all the time. To find these stations, we use plugshare.com, also available as an app to find reliable charging on the go. You can also use this tool to plan a trip based on your vehicle's range capabilities. The app will advise you where to stop along the way to ensure that you're able to get from point A to point B without running out of charge. We'll now take a quick break for Q&A. For this Q&A, we'll be fielding questions you've asked in the Q&A box. If you have questions you haven't asked yet, go ahead and add them in the Q&A. And remember, if you have a question, someone else probably has the same one, so there are no bad questions. Go ahead and open up the Q&A now. Looks like Michael Sarasat has been answering a couple of these. So from Katie here, it looks like it's from Marilee. What are the rebates for 2022 for an EV and a wall charger that don't have an income limit? So unfortunately, all of the incentives that you're going to qualify for or that are available are going to have an income limit for the increased incentive. But there are some incentives that don't have they have a standard rebate or standard incentive that won't have an income cap to it. Some examples are the Southern California Edison rebate program for buying a used EV. It essentially offers $1,000 up to $4,000 depending on your income and depending on where you live. And for wall chargers, it depends on where you live as well. If you live in an apartment, we have some programs that are available for installing in shared spaces in apartments. There's also a $1,000 tax credit for installing in homes. It's just a small sample size. I'll get to more of those incentives later on. Okay. When will there be enough EV fast charging for holiday weekends? Wait times can be hours. Yes, this is true. We're currently working on increasing the amount of chargers that are available. You just have to plan ahead. A lot of the times, take routes that are going to offer you the best options for charging. We are working really hard to make sure that we get more DC fast charging along highway corridors, so it's convenient and simple for people to get charging. I'll do one more question here. is there a regulation in place that keeps charging costs stable? This is from John C. This is, they're actually putting regulations currently. They're going to start next year on charging. They're going to regulate not only the charger, but the cost. Currently there you can charge what you like if you own a charger at your own business. And this has allowed a lot of people to be able to install these chargers and recoup their costs pretty quickly. But you're going to start seeing more regulatory charging. But just like at gas stations, the cost isn't the same. So you can't expect EV chargers to be the same, and it'll change based on the time of day. If you're charging during peak hours, it's going to cost a little bit more than it would cost at a different time of the day, like during off-peak hours. Looks like we actually have a little bit more time, so I'll answer a few more questions. Are there rebates or tax credits available for EV lease buyout? From Joan. That is a very good question. With these incentives for purchasing at the end of your lease, if you, let's say, have a lease and you apply the tax credit ahead of time, a lot of the times the dealership will decrease your residual at the end. So they'll actually decrease that value so that when you buy it at the end of your lease, it's a decreased cost. There are also some incentives that you can use for used vehicles. So if it's a used vehicle that you're looking at, like let's say you're purchasing somebody else's vehicle that previously was on a lease, there's incentives for that as well. Through here. Should I charge my EV daily to 100% or run it down to about 20 to 30 and charge to 80%? Thank you for that question, Omar. It's a very common question. With charging, it's standard to charge it to about 80%. If you charge it to 100% all the time, just like with your cell phone, it is a lithium-ion battery. And if you are just forcing electrons into it, it does degrade it faster. So I do recommend charging to about 80%, charging back up right around when you said about 20 to 30% charge. And that's how you keep your battery life lasting a lot longer. So I definitely recommend doing that instead of charging up to 100%. The time you'd charge to 100% would be on long road trips. So if you're doing DC fast charging and you need to get across the state, for example, that's a good option for you to do, but I don't recommend doing it all the time. Let's see, going through the chat. There's a good chunk of answered questions. So if your question was already answered, it should be in the answered section. State of battery substitutes for lithium. That's a good question, Steve. Thank you for asking that. The technology is still advancing. I don't know where it is currently at. The technology for recycling is getting better for the current lithium-ion batteries. They're able to recycle about 90% of the product. Not all of it can be reused, of course. That is something that they're currently working on, and I expect it to increase as time goes on and you start to get more money and investment into recycling batteries. Just like with any technology, the more money that gets funneled into it, the faster the technology is able to really adapt and start to develop more. So unfortunately, we're out of time for questions. Thank you all for posting those in the chat. I'm going to be answering some more questions later on, but I'd like to introduce Tal Advitzer, an EV driver who worked with CEC multiple times to electrify his cars and his home. Tal, welcome, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Sean. The reason I volunteered to speak at this webinar is because I'm grateful to the kind folks at CEC for being such an amazing resource, not only for me personally, but for our community. 10 years ago, in 2013, Michael Chiakos of CEC led me through all the necessary steps to lease my first electric car, a Fiat 500e, for an incredibly low monthly fee. Also in 2013, the CEC worked with my contractor that installed solar panels on my home, making sure all rebates, refunds, incentives, and tax credits were taken advantage of to lower the total cost of my system. In 2021, the CEC contacted me again to let me know of all the rebates and incentives currently available for the purchase of a new electric car. With all the choices, I went with the electric Mini. The out-the-door price for a base model was $34,150. With the CEC guidance, I ended up paying $15,150. If you include the $1,000 charging credit, that was another unexpected incentive, it was actually $14,150. I now have a goal of getting my house off natural gas. I've already replaced a gas dryer, and I'm currently in the process of replacing a gas furnace, gas water heater, and gas stove, again, all with the help of CEC. You may ask why I got an electric car and care about getting off gas. The reason is it just seems like the right thing to do. There's no denying our planet is in trouble. I'm not rich. I'm an artist and a part-time teacher. My wife's a nurse, but these projects are not super expensive. They make me feel like I'm doing my part to help with the global climate crisis. And actually, in the long run, they end up being less expensive alternatives. For example, I've now owned the electric Mini for 2.5 years. There have been zero maintenance costs. And I mainly use free charging options all over town, so almost zero battery recharge costs. And now if I run out to the store, there's like zero guilt for taking the car. Thanks, Sean.
Excellent, Todd. I appreciate you telling us your story. We have some time for a couple questions for you. You mentioned that CEC helped you along the way. What kinds of questions did you have that we were able to help you with?
Well, at the time, the CEC told me about 4 major programs that were available to EV purchasers. There was the Clean Vehicle Assistance Program, the CVAP. That was $5,000 off the purchase price at the time of purchase. There was the California Clean Fuel Reward. That was $1,500 off the purchase price, also at the time of purchase. I guess that was put together by the California Air Resources Board together with Edison. Then there was the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, the CVRP, and that I needed to apply for, and that took a little while to get. That was another $4,500 refunded. And there was the federal tax rebate that was $7,500. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing. That I don't know how that program's now. At the time, it was good for like the first 200,000 models, and it was limited to certain purchase prices, but my car was below the max. So yeah, I got that full $7,500 back.
Awesome. That's great to hear. When you were applying for any of those incentives, did you face any challenges? And if so, how were you able to navigate those challenges?
I did face some challenges. I was lucky. I chose the Mini, like I said, and that closest dealership was Bob Smith down in Calabasas. Well, we drove down there, and it turned out they were not participating in the CVAP program. They weren't even aware of it. So I kind of, said, okay, we just won't get the Mini. And then they called me a week later and they said they joined the program just for me. That was incredible. That was the first challenge. Second challenge was, in order to take part in the CVAP, we had to have the car in our hands by a certain date. And there were no Minis on the lot. They're made to order online, and then they're built in England, put on a carrier through Panama, sent to Port Hueneme. Then the dealer picks them up, and there was a long line to get them. So once again, the dealership came through. They pushed us to the top of the line, and we got it with weeks to spare. It was incredible.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear.
There was
a couple more.
I have a few more challenges, though. I'm not.
Oh, no.
Another challenge
Well, I'm glad.
was just, I don't know if this, still applies to today, but the CVRP ran out of money. And the way that I was told the CVRP is funded is they're funded by the California Air Resources Board, which gets their money for what's called caps and trade proceeds. I guess the government sets emission standards and the companies, if they exceed, they pay. Anyway, by the time I had my car and applied for it, they were out of money. And the CEC talked me through it. They calmed me down. I said, don't worry, they'll get replenished. And sure enough, I had to wait a few months, but they did eventually get replenished. So I got my $4,500 rebate check back. I just had to wait. And for the federal tax credit of $7,500, I think, based on my personal case with the taxes, I think I had to not contribute to an IRA so I could get the full $7,500 as opposed to just a portion of it.
Awesome. I'm glad that we were able to help you with navigating those things. I know it can be challenging trying to figure out these incentive programs and working with dealerships. I'm glad you were able to figure that out. That's fantastic to hear. A couple more questions for you. We do our best, so I'm glad we were able to assist you. One more question for you. What advice would you give to someone on the fence about making the switch to an EV? And what do you like most about driving electric?
Well, you touched on most of the benefits already, Sean. I'll just repeat. Obviously there's no gas. You're saving money on no gas. It's environmentally friendly. You don't emit pollutants. You're lowering smog and greenhouse gases. And actually in 2.5 years, there's been zero maintenance. Like I said earlier, the only maintenance is I had to fill up the tires twice. So like every year, I just take out my bike pump and fill out the tires. I'll tell you what the dealer told me, how they sell these electric cars, the great performance, which I agree, it does have great performance. The quick acceleration, they say peak torque from standstill to great handling, because the position of the batteries, it lowers the car's center of gravity for the superior weight distribution, which improves cornering and stability, all that. It's really true that the Mini is like a little go-kart. It is fun to drive. And going back to the cost, I noticed like to get about 100 miles, it's about 25 kilowatt hours. At EVgo stations, the charge is 20 cents per kilowatt hour. So that comes out to about $5 to go 100 miles. If you're in a car getting 25 miles a gallon and gas costs $5 a gallon, it'll be like $20 as opposed to $5. So there's that. And also, it doesn't apply to me, but you can drive solo in carpool lanes if you have to commute on the highway.
Great points. I have one more question actually from myself. And it's also something that was asked in the chat. The question, I'm losing it. Looks like it was maybe answered. The question was that you asked, or you mentioned public charging in around town. That was free public charging. Could you speak a little bit about that? I think a lot of people would love to hear about it.
I get that question a lot when people find out I have an EV. They ask, do you have trouble charging? And prior to this car, I had 4 years of the Fiat. So 4 years of the Fiat, 2.5 years of this car, I've never had trouble charging anywhere. And as a matter of fact, there are quite a few free charging spaces all over town. Like if you go to the San Nuevo Mall inside, they have free charging. And if you keep it under 75 minutes, then you don't even have to pay the parking fee. Also at the public market in their parking garage, they have free charging there. I worked at City College for a long time. We had free charging at City College. So no, never really had any trouble. And because there's so much free parking, I got to tell you that $1,000 charging card that I qualified for when I got the car, I've used very little of it. It's possible. It's possible to get by. Not only finding a charging station, but finding free ones. So,
yeah, I saw Michael Sarasat answered in the Q&A that the plug share map that I'll point you to later in this webinar is a great resource for finding the costs of charging. But I want to say thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story, Tal. We appreciate your time. We're going to have to move on for the sake of time, but thank you for sharing all of your insights.
Okay. And thank you, CEC, for everything you're doing. It's great. Goodbye.
So as Tal mentioned, we offer assistance with more than just EV purchasing and EV charger installation assistance. We also offer assistance with home electrification and efficiency and solar for nonprofits and affordable housing. If you're a homeowner or landlord and want EV chargers installed at your property, feel free to sign up for a meeting with me. I can offer you some guidance. Just scan the QR code or go to the website there, and you can anything related to EVs will be a meeting with me. If you live in an apartment and don't have chargers installed but want them to be installed, send us your landlord's info and we can reach out to them on your behalf or provide you with the necessary info to convince them to install chargers yourself. For one-on-one EV purchase guidance, you can sign up through this link or through the EVs for Everyone website. I'll provide some instructions later in the webinar. So fortunately, for those looking to purchase or lease an electric vehicle, there are a variety of financial incentives available, especially for low-income individuals. Federal incentives include the new and used federal tax credit. This incentive offers $7,500 for new EVs. The list of vehicles that qualify for this incentive has gotten a bit smaller as battery sourcing requirements have increased. A complete list of qualifying vehicles can be found on the IRS website. A tax credit is also offered for the used EVs with an amount up to $4,000. Beginning January 1st, 2024, this incentive will be available as a point of sale rebate, decreasing the total amount that the vehicle will cost. We can touch on that a little bit more if people have specific questions about that. At the state and local level, there are also financial incentives available for purchasing or leasing an electric vehicle. This includes local air pollution control district incentives, including their old car buyback program. Additionally, there are utility-funded rebates such as Southern California Edison and PG&E used EV rebates, and Central Coast Community Energy's rebate for a new or used EV purchase or lease. At the state level, CVRP, or the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, offers up to $7,500 in rebates. Tal mentioned earlier, it was a little bit less. They've actually increased that number, and that's for the purchase of a new EV. Please note that this program is coming to a close with applications being put on standby currently. They're still accepting applications, but funds are not guaranteed. Additionally, there's a California grant program with an estimated launch of December 2023. We expect this program to replace the California Vehicle Assistance Program, which closed earlier this year. We'll know more details about this program soon. Incentives are also available for installing EV chargers. These programs include Communities in Charge for Level 2 charging and Cali VIP for installing DC fast chargers. If you're a property owner and would like assistance installing Level 2 or Level 3 chargers at your property, please don't hesitate to reach out to me for assistance. In addition, there are local and regional incentives, such as PG&E's Empower EV program for installing EV chargers at single-family housing, and Southern California Edison's Charge Ready program for installing chargers at new construction sites. Additionally, each of the APCDs, or air pollution control districts, offer their own EV charger incentive installation programs. Financial incentives for purchasing or leasing EVs are constantly changing. Many people feel like they're running on a treadmill with financial incentives. They're putting in a lot of effort, but they're not really getting anywhere. The chief way that the Community Environmental Council is working to make it easier for all people to better understand EVs, financial incentives, and budgeting is through our free EVs for Everyone purchase guidance program. With so many programs opening and closing, it can be nearly impossible to keep track of the changes on your own. And that's where our purchase guidance program comes in. The goal of our program is to help low-income and underserved communities overcome barriers to buying or leasing an affordable, reliable electric vehicle by offering one-on-one assistance in Spanish and English to allow access for more people, prioritized support for low to moderate income households with the longest commutes. The people that benefit the most are folks who already spend a lot on transportation for their commute. These people fit the mold the best because if they're only moving around town in short increments, then something like an e-bike could be a better option for them. And provide streamlined income verification with Access Clean California for state EV incentives. Please note that purchase guidance will be provided until May 31st, 2024, or until the Cycle 3 funding from Electrify America is exhausted. So, why the need for this service? Well, there are many barriers to purchasing and owning an electric vehicle. The most obvious is the price tag. EVs are known for having a higher upfront cost than gas-powered cars. EVs are the lowest cost option over the life of the vehicle, but have a higher upfront cost. Gasoline is more expensive than electricity, making fuel costs the largest difference maker. Maintenance costs for EVs are also significantly lower, as I mentioned before, and not that many people are aware of the incentive programs available to them. Even if they're aware of them, they're super difficult to navigate on your own, which is where we come in. Lastly, the issue of where to conveniently charge your new electric vehicle can be a large barrier and one that we help people navigate. Finding a charging station close to your work, for example, can allow people more flexibility. To assist our participants, we help them come up with a personalized budget, navigate and apply for EV incentives, identify vehicles that work for them, and assist them with dealing with dealerships when needed. We recently had a participant come through our program who was able to take advantage of the California rebate, California grant, and the Central Coast Community Energy rebate, receiving $17,500 off of her lease and a dealership discount of $4,500 off of her lease, allowing her to have no lease payments for 3 years. She intends to save the money that she'll be saving on gasoline costs and car payments and purchase the vehicle at the end of her lease term. To sign up and receive individualized EV purchase guidance, just search evsforeveryone.org in your web browser. Click the button that says sign up on the first page. And for EVs para todos, click Español in the top right-hand corner. Alternatively, you can type evsparatodos.org into the search bar, and it'll bring you right to this page. Through our EV purchase guidance program, we point people to Access Clean California. Access Clean California promotes transportation equity by prioritizing support for disadvantaged communities who otherwise would miss out on benefits that help people access clean transportation. They use a statewide partner outreach network, and CEC is one of these partners. Through the EVs for Everyone program, we advise people to apply to Access Clean California to verify your income and streamline the process for applying to state and local incentives, making it easier to receive rebates and grants. We have each of our purchase guidance participants enroll in this program. Verifying your income now for incentives that you plan on applying to later can help speed up the process down the road. Access Clean California has a variety of other equity programs, including EV incentives, charging infrastructure and solar power, transit vouchers, shared mobility, solar, and e-bikes. If you're interested in any of Access Clean California's other equity programs, I highly recommend checking out the website. For assistance with purchasing or leasing an EV, I advise signing up for the EVs for Everyone purchase guidance program, and I can assist you with any questions you have for your application. So here are a few more of the online resources that we recommend using and use ourselves. PlugShare, which I mentioned earlier, can be used to find charging stations in your area and plan your routes during road trips to ensure you make it from point A to point B without running out of a charge. I recommend this app to anyone who owns and drives an EV. Electric for All's website is a great hub for EV resources and EV exploration tools. Check it out to explore available EV options, find resources, and read about some common EV myths. And Electrek's website provides a detailed guide on available EV leases and prices. Check it out if you're trying to figure out a good option for purchase or lease. If you'd like in-person help, visit a National Drive Electric Week event next week. Free community events will feature EV test drives. You can actually get in the vehicle and feel what it feels like. EV showcases and one-on-one consultations with CEC team members about EV rebates, incentive programs, and more. All right, we're going to go ahead and jump into another Q&A segment. We'll be answering questions that you've shared in the Q&A box. I have a couple here ready. We have a question from Aaron and Lorianne asking about apartments and condos. Are EVs feasible for condo or apartment dwellers with no way to charge at home and possibilities for condo-wide chargers several years away? Yes, absolutely. As Tal mentioned earlier, there's free charging that's available, which is really great option for anybody who is looking to save some money. There's also public charging that is really actually pretty affordable. As I mentioned earlier, it can be significantly cheaper than gasoline. So doing public charging is definitely a great option. Also, if you have a place to park, if you have assigned parking and there is a outlet, a 120 volt outlet, you can plug in and get slower charging. If you don't have access to that, you can definitely reach out to us or have us reach out to your landlord for getting some chargers installed. There's a variety of incentives that are available that we could really help educate them about, hopefully get them to agree to install chargers at a faster pace than a few years away. We have another question from Steve. When will charging become universal, not just for Tesla, but for Tesla users? Charging currently, most chargers you can charge, most charging stations you'll be able to actually charge at with any electric vehicle. Most of them have gone to a standard J1772 charger. There are still a few vehicles like the Nissan Leaf that's using a CHAdeMO, but most of them you actually can charge at any charging station. With Tesla charging stations, they're offering it's a adapter that you can actually plug into your vehicle to charge at those stations. That's been rolled out. It does cost some money, hoping that it will become free in the future, because I think it would make a lot of sense to be able to charge anywhere that you like. What is the status of fast chargers planned on Highway 99 and Highway 5 from California to Washington? There are currently a bunch of incentives that are available for installing these. So we're seeing a lot more being installed along Highway 99 and Highway 5. We're also doing individualized outreach to business owners, places like Costco with large parking lots. We're really targeting those places to install these chargers since they have so much space that's not being used typically. John C. asks, is there a regulation in place that keeps charging costs stable? I think I already answered that question. But that's, like I said before, they're going to regulate it, but just like gas stations, you can't require any kind of hard line to charge at because the cost of electricity does fluctuate. I have a question from Aiden J. I want to buy an EV, but I know there's a lot of innovation going on in that space. So is it better to wait a few years for even more or better EV options? There actually has been a lot of advancements in technology recently. Just like in any car, if you look at cars that were made 20 years ago, they're very different than they are now. So there will always be advancements in technology, but the technology that is currently available is very, very impressive. I've heard stories from all different kinds of electric vehicle owners with all different types of models, and people really love these vehicles. They're fantastic to drive. The problems that a lot of people were facing early with things like battery issues are much on the decline. So if you're ready to make a purchase now, I definitely say go for it. There are a lot of great options currently available. Question from Amanda: is it correct that the federal tax rebate only applies if you owe federal taxes? So if you don't owe taxes, there are ways to get around this. One way that you can do this is going to a dealership directly and saying, I would like to apply the federal tax credit at the point of purchase. You can do this currently for leases. So if you say, I would like to decrease my lease payment, you can pass the tax credit over to the dealership if they agree to do so. Starting in January 1st, 2024, you'll actually be able to apply this same situation for a purchase rather than just for leases, which will help a lot of people that are facing this issue of not having enough tax liability. So that's one change that's happening real soon. If you sign up for purchase guidance, I can take you through it in more detail. Is there guidance for folks outside of SLO, SB, Ventura counties? There's nothing currently statewide, but there is the same program at Upper Central Coast. So in the Monterey County, for example, and surrounding areas there, it's being offered there as well. But nothing statewide yet, unfortunately. Be something I would like to see in the future. All right. Couple more questions. Are there rebates or incentives available for owners of e-bikes that cannot afford EVs such as cars? Yes, there are. As I mentioned earlier, with the Access Clean California, they have some rebates and incentives for e-bikes. And they also, they act as kind of a concierge service. They point you in the right direction for different incentives. So go ahead and check them out. I don't work with e-bikes directly myself, so I can't advise you on what's directly available, but there are things available, and I definitely recommend looking into Access Clean California for that. Looks like we have just a little bit more time for some more questions. I'm going to go through the Q&A here. If you have any more questions that you'd like answered, go ahead and drop them in there. It could be a follow-up question to something I mentioned. We have a question from Sandra. What if you purchase an used EV vehicle from a private party? Can you still get rebates? This is a tricky question to answer because it depends on the program. Some programs will allow for private party purchases, others don't. It really depends on the program. If you sign up with purchase guidance, I can take you through it, and we can look at what incentives you qualify directly off the top of my head. I can't remember, unfortunately, which programs those are, but there are programs that are offered for private party, but purchasing from a used dealership or a new vehicle dealership is probably the best option to make sure that you can get the most incentives available, and you'd actually probably end up saving more by going that route. So I'd recommend asking me one-on-one, and I can break it down for you based on what incentives are currently available. Right. Yeah, to sign up, Stephen Barley asked, would you remind us how to sign up for purchase guidance? We'll be sending out a link in the follow-up email with a link to sign up for it. You can also, there'll be the QR code later on, again, in this webinar, so you can go ahead and just scan that and click that you're interested in EV purchase or lease, and it'll automatically set up a meeting, or I'll send you an email. It'll put you right into my queue. I'll send you an email and we'll set up a meeting one-on-one. Will there be someone to help with the incentives? Yes, that will be me, Omar. I help with the purchase guidance for both EV charging and EV purchasing or leasing, so I'll take you through that directly. And we'll look at things like your income, where you live. It's really personalized based on your needs and your situation. Aaron Johnson asked, are long range options worth the extra money and battery size, or are standard range enough for people? You know, it really depends on your situation. Sometimes it makes sense to go with something that's longer range if you do a lot of driving. So for example, if you have a 100-mile commute every day, it might make sense to do something with a longer range, like something like a Nissan Leaf with 100 miles of range. It probably isn't enough unless if you had a place to charge at work and at home. Otherwise, you'd end up charging very frequently. So I'd definitely say if you sign up for the program, I can look at your situation and give you a best advice on that, but it really just depends. If you need something with longer range, the longer range vehicles tend to be more luxury. It really depends on the type of car. So it's dependent on your situation and what you need for range. Dominique put a question in the chat from Sarah. Are there rebates or incentives available for owners of e-bikes that cannot afford EVs such as cars? Yes, I answered that previously. I definitely recommend checking out Access Clean California. And if you sign up with a meeting for me, I could look into that a little bit more. I just don't, off the top of my head, have any information further than just a couple of resources that you could look into at this time, due to me just not working directly in e-bikes. Any more questions? All right. I think that is all the questions that you have. I'll answer some more questions later. So we can go ahead and move on. Thanks everyone for the great questions. If I didn't touch on any of your questions in there and nobody from the chat answered, you can put them in there again. We'd be happy to work with you to answer all your questions one-on-one as well. You can just go to that QR code that will pop up on the screen now. And we can work with you one-on-one to answer those questions. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to share answers to many of your questions in our resource toolkit email, which you'll receive next week, along with the webinar recording. All right, so now that we're going to have a quick poll, so go ahead and fill that out when it pops up, and then share with us in the chat. What are your biggest takeaways from today? As you share that, I'd like to give a round of thanks. I wanted to say thank you to Tal for sharing his EV experience, and to everyone who was helping answer questions in the chat, including my team members and Christian Hoffman from the city of Santa Barbara. We really appreciate everyone sharing their knowledge with us today. Thank you to our production team for making this webinar a great success. Thank you to the climate mitigation team for your hard work on all of our projects and for helping to assist our community in the transition to a cleaner and greener future. Thank you to Rooted Language Justice for your continued work, allowing us to bring our content to a broader audience. And thank you to all for attending our webinar and taking steps to electrify your transportation. We really appreciate all of you being here. I'll give you a few seconds to go ahead and fill out that poll. Let's go ahead and do that now. We are back. Excellent. So you should have all answered that poll. It should have popped up. Thank you for doing that. We really appreciate you doing that. It gives us really great feedback. When you get the chance, on to the next slide. If it's working now. Excellent. So thank you to our sponsors, the City of Santa Barbara Clean Energy, and the Santa Barbara Independent. We really appreciate your support. Free events like this are just one way that the Community Environment Council works to advance rapid and equitable solutions to the climate crisis. And events like this are only made possible because of donations from individuals like you. You can visit the QR code on the screen or visit cecsb.org/donate. As you consider your yearly investments, no matter the amount, we hope you will consider a gift to our work. Another way you can support CEC is by sharing what you love about our work and how we have impacted you or the broader community. We'll share a link in the chat if you'd like to share your story. CEC's Environmental Hub is now open and available for meetings and events. We'll have a special section on our webinar website with all of the details. And the follow-up email that I recently mentioned will also include upcoming events and opportunities. Here are a few of them. An in-person Guadalupe Clean Air Fair at Leroy Park on September 24th, a webinar on remodeling, a great time to improve efficiency and electrify your life on October 17th, a live talk by Jeff Goodall at UCSB, also on October 17th, a link where you can find information on all of CEC's events is being placed in the chat now. In addition to attending events, there are many other ways you can take action, from taking political action to becoming a CEC climate steward. You can visit this link to learn more. You could also scan the QR code if that's easy for you. I want to say thank you all again for tuning in to our CEC webinar series. If you haven't already, please join our newsletter and engage with us on your favorite social media channel. This brings our webinar to a close. We'll leave this slide up for a few moments in case you'd like to scan the QR code or jot down our social media info. I'll also send this and all the resources we shared today in that follow-up email. Hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon.